along with stories about Emmanuel Macron's speech last night over the easing of the lockdown. Now, in regard to these shocking videos of police brutality, Libération denounced what the paper calls the extreme violence of the police officers as they beat migrants and assaulted activists who were calling for decent housing for them. Now, the paper says that, quote, there is a breaking of the republic here that is going on with complete impunity. And another left-leaning paper, L'Humanité, says that the nation has been wounded and shamed by such violence. It notes that there may be political consequences here. Like Libération, it blames the government, saying it is not only turning a blind eye to a humanitarian migrant crisis, but it is also breaking down the nation's safeguards to call out police brutality.
Solange, how is the foreign press covering not just Monday night's clashes, but also this latest legislation from the government?
Well, first we need to explain the context here. The police clearing came out just as France's National Assembly passed a global security law that outlaws the filming of police without blurring their faces. And for the Atlantic, France is on the verge of becoming a less free nation because the law and two others, a law about education and one about research restrictions. For the French author, such laws may help Macron with far-right voters, but it is chipping away, the Atlantic says, from the very freedoms that Macron's government claims to defend, not to mention France's image as well.
And these kind of policies could actually change how foreigners see France.
Yeah, in Slate today, Rokhaya Diallo, she's a well-known French author. She argues that the myth of an egalitarian, unracist France is crumbling, that the very real reality of racism in France is finally seeping through. The author says that Macron's legislation on schools, on his speeches on immigration and on Islam, and recent events like the killing of the teacher Samuel Paty, they have stripped away what she calls, quote, a facade of universalism, or the idea that is very existent in France that there is this happy coexistence between everyone and between races.
Now, this idea of a happy coexistence is also the subject of a few other articles that you found on nature and the environment.
Yeah, the Washington Post tells us of a Native American tribe called the Swinomish who've adapted their traditions to fight climate change. 10 years ago, they created a plan to fight against the loss of salmon, of clams, of plant populations. And not only is it working, but other tribes in the U.S. and Canada are taking similar steps. Now, how to live harmoniously or to visit wild places is also the subject of a fun article in the New York Times. The paper explains that visitors of Jasper National Park are told not to let moose lick their cars. Yes, lick. Why? Well, the moose love the salt that is on the cars that's been collected from de-icing of roads, and they're drawn to them, quote, like the best restaurants they've ever eaten at. The only problem, the national park says, is that attraction to, say, moving cars or to parked ones when you're taking that selfie with a moose, well, it can be dangerous for all those around.
Not to mention if the moose gets its tongue stuck on your frozen car.
Yeah.
Like in that movie. All right, let's shift gears completely now. So today, on a more serious note, is the International Day for Eliminating Violence Against Women. The Italian press says they're making progress there.
Yeah, and the La Stampa says that this code red, or a law by which police officers have to take into account a woman's complaint within 3 days, seems to be working. But the paper says that it's too early to cry victory against such brutality, for feminicides still exist in Italy, and even if the numbers are dropping, and that violence against women isn't always physical, they say, but can also take the shape of wage discrepancies, of fewer jobs, and less financial freedom.
Now, financial pressure might be lifted or will be lifted, at least in one domain, in Scotland. Tell us about that.
Yeah, as The Guardian tells us, Scotland has become the first nation in the world to provide free sanitary pads and tampons to women. And the paper says the move has come about after a 4-year grassroots campaign to destigmatize menstruation and to call attention to period poverty. Now, what is period poverty? Well, as the Scotsman tells us, it is the struggle to pay for such basic products once a month. And this has actually surged, they say, since the coronavirus pandemic, and that even before the pandemic, over 137,000 children across the UK miss school every year because they couldn't afford such products. So good news coming there from Scotland.
And that is a great initiative. Now, staying with the theme of women's bodies and their stories, there's a really interesting opinion piece from Meghan Markle that came out this morning.
Yeah, it just dropped, and in a heartfelt sharing of her own miscarriage, the Duchess of Sussex talks about the importance of being open about such often hush-hush subjects, such as miscarriage, and actually sharing stories of pain, of talking about the hard things that have and are happening to us